Hello, and welcome to our meetup number 16. Winter is here, and for many of us, the days are shorter, the weather is colder, and it's officially the season of warm drinks, cozy hoodies, and glowing monitors. And of course, some of you might be joining from sunnier places where winter is just a word, but wherever you are in the world, this meetup is a good excuse to slow down a bit and warm up with some fresh ideas. So Vue.js Talks number 16 is almost here. It's powered by VueStick UI and Epic Max and bringing fresh perspective just in time to wrap up the year with something inspiring. This series exists to bring the developers together to learn, to exchange ideas, and stay curious about the technologies shaping modern frontend and beyond. At Epic Max, we built open source tools for Vue developers, VueStick UI for clean and flexible Vue 3 components, and not only, and a VueStick admin, a polished admin dashboard used in teams around the world. We care deeply about the Vue ecosystem and contribute whenever we can, especially when sharing knowledge helps the community to grow. This pre-holiday edition brings 3 engaging talks from speakers approaching frontend from very different angles: AI assistant development, human-centered agility, and practical mapping solution in Vue. So let's just dive into our today's agenda. So in today's agenda, we have Alexander Opalic with his Context Engineering 101, getting the best Vue code out of the Claude code. A practical look at how better context leads to better AI-generated Vue code, and how to work with the modern AI tools more effectively instead of fighting them. The next one would be Magdalena Stutz, People First, bringing agility beyond the team. The insightful talk about agility that goes beyond processes and frameworks, focusing on people, culture, and how organization can truly evolve. And last but not least, Elen, not the first time in our meetups, Google Mapping with Vue, a hands-on perspective on integration Google Maps into Vue application, covering real-world and use cases and practical implementation tips. So grab the cup of something warm, get comfortable, and join for our last Vue.js Talks session before the holidays. Let's move on to our first speaker, to Alexander. As far as I remember, Alexander also not the first time on our meetups as well. So let's welcome Alexander. He is a full-stack developer living in Germany and working for Auto Payments. In his free time, he regularly writes in-depth articles about Vue.js on op.dev, and also avid reader of books, manga, and more. So I'm passing the microphone and giving a sense to you, Alexander. Hello, and nice to see you there again.
Yeah, also nice to be here again. Good. Then I will share my screen. Yep. This time, 1 second. Okay, perfect. Yeah, today I want to talk about Cloud Code and share some tips and tricks that I learned over the last months. And yeah, as you said, I already had the honor to do a talk, the school meetup. Last time it was about testing. This time it will be more about how we can use AI coding tools better for Vue applications. Because over the last, 3 or 4 months, I've been working on 3 side projects. So my first side project was a Markdown editor, but with Vim, because I was learning Vim key bindings this year. The other one was a Next block starter, and the current one is just my own workout app. And for all these applications, my goal was also to not write any code myself and see how far I can come with that. And at the beginning, yeah, it was not working so smoothly, but I think now I have a good workflow. And this is basically what I want to share today. Some general tips. Even if you don't use Cloud Code, maybe you use, VS Code, Copilot, or Cursor. I think there are some general tips that I apply to all AI coding assistants. And yeah, But the first thing that I also find out is no matter which tricks you try to do, if you have a messy code base, if it's hard for developer to understand, the AI will also have a problem. That's why most of my blog posts regarding Vue in the past were always about the basics, how to structure Vue projects, how to write good tests, all these things. Because what I found out, if you start a fresh project and you just say, here, please test this, what AI tools will do, they will write terrible tests, they will test implementation details, and yeah, they don't have any taste. So it's our responsibility to have a good code base and to manage these tools. And also what I believe, even now for my side project, I'm a huge fan of GitHub Actions, and I have type checks, everything, that when I create a PR, that I can do whatever I can to know that the code is working. And yeah, I think this to be set up correctly, because when you use something like Cloud Code or Cursor, these tools, they will read your code all the time. So you say, make the checkout button blue. What they will do is they will read all your code. And in the end, they will mimic a bit your style. So if you have always components that are, I don't know, 2,000 lines long, the AI will have a hard problem to understand them, but also devs will have a hard problem. And yeah, that's why good code base makes the job much easier. Of course, I know that if you have a bigger project that's older than 3 or 5 years, you will have many legacy systems. But the nice thing now with all these AI coding tools is that refactoring is also much easier. So I'm a huge fan, for example, of Michael Thiessen, and he has many good blog posts about how to refactor Vue components, and you can use his techniques and do the refactoring. And then slowly you have a better code base, and then also AI coding tools work better. But now that we're talking about the foundations, now I want to share my tips and also some basics how Cloud Code works. And for each feature, I also want to explain how I use it for Vue projects. So the first thing that is important to understand is this concept of context. So here, if you use Cloud Code, you type in /context. You see that I use Opus 4, and you see that this was already a session where I did something. You see most of my tokens are already gone. And you also see that I have some agents. I will talk more about it later, some / comments and so on. Important to understand is that when you start the session, you and Cloud Code are the most clever that you can be. But the longer the session goes, the more stupid these AI coding tools get. That's why if it reaches 200K token, what Cloud Code will do is it will do an auto compact. So, and then it will start again. Yeah, this is the current big limitations. And also, if you build agents for enterprise and they should do automation, they all face this context problem. Yeah, but we also face this problem if we want to finish a bigger task that would take longer. Yeah, we have the same problem. That's why there are some tips how to improve the context. I think the first one is that you have a CloudMD file. If you use VS Code Copilot, it's called instruction. And the idea is that when you start a fresh session, you give the AI some hints. You tell it, okay, we use Vue, we use PNPM. You give it some basics, because otherwise, in each session, it has no idea about the code base, and it would find out all your specific setup again and again. That's why the first step, if you want to improve your AI coding tools, look up how you can improve the CloudMD file. Cursor and VS Code Cobalt have the same concept. And then what you can also do is, if you have a flat structure, for example, and you have everything under components, under pages, you can also have nested CloudMD files. And then under components, you can give some tips. I don't know, we use Tailwind, things like that. But important, you should not put too much into these CloudMD files. Always, it's better to use ESLint, for example. If you want to, for example, that Cloud should always use this new use template ref, there's a ESLint rule for that. I would not put this into a CloudMD file, because the bigger these files get, the bigger the context gets, and it's also less that it will even follow these rules. So this is the CloudMD root file for my workout tracking app. You see the stack that I use. I use, for example, IndexedDB and Dexy, because I want to have a local first app. I'm a fan of feature-based architecture. And then I also tell it the basic commands that it can run, which helps it. When it is done with something, it can then run lint or test. Also, in the end, before it commits anything, it should run type check, lint, and test. And yeah, you can also put something like use conventional commits, these kind of things. And then also, cool pattern is if you have a monorepo and maybe use something like WritePress and you have your own documentation, you can list down a map and say, if you do something regarding out, please check out this documentation. Then most of the time, it's clever enough if your ticket has something related to out that it will read that by itself. Yeah. Then only one example where I have this classical styling guide was define model, because I think I didn't saw ESLint rule for that. That's why I was adding it. But I think these things should probably never be there. I could also maybe write a custom ESLint rule for that. Yeah. And since when we run it on a machine, we have access. We can download the GitHub CLI. We can download a tree. We can download more things that would help Cloud Code to do things better. But important, if you do that, I would mention it in the CloudMD file, because then it knows, okay, if I need to check out while a pull request is failing, I can use the GitHub CLI. Yeah, so these are general things I would put into the root. Of course, it's always different depending on your project. Now, this is one file that is under my tests files. So as we know, here you can also nest the CloudMD files. So there could be our own tests folder. And then I have some test-specific things, because I have a special test setup, I would say. I use a VTest browser. I try to write more integration-like tests. I also have some helpers and so on. So I want to give it this as a context, because I know this is not really into his training data. And yeah, also for my tests, I always mock the IndexedDB, and there's a way to reset it. So every test has a fresh state. And this basically is the information for my last talk, where I was talking about how to test Vue composables. This is also what I have included, because I noticed that when you don't give it any hints, it struggles a little bit with the difference between when you should use the Swiss setup and when not, and so on. That's why I also added that. And if you want to optimize your CloudMD file or instructions file, this blog post is really good. Many tips there. The beauty is also you can also just copy paste the whole blog post and tell Cloud Code here, please read all my Cloud MD files and optimize it. And this is exactly what I did. And I'm happy with my current approach there. But I also know, I don't know, some months ago, people were adding too many things like style guides, and you can just use ESLint for that. Then the next building block is called slash commands. In the end, it's just a prompt. But I think this is also a nice thing, because if you do something more often, like you do a refactoring or you commit something, you can convert it into a prompt. And the idea here is, this is a typical prompt. It's just a markdown file. You put it under .cloud comments, and then you give it a description. You can also write down which tools are allowed. So in this case, git add and git commit. And you can also define a model. In this example, I used Haiku because it's faster, but not so clever. And then you see commit changes and this git diff. And with this exclamation mark, this means that this command will run before Cloud Code sees it. And this is really nice, because then it's much faster. This is not something that VS Code, I think, has at the moment. But yeah, with that, when you change something in your code base, you just type in slash commit and you get a nice commit message. And yeah, this is always something that is, for me personally, annoying to come up with a good commit message myself. But the beauty is that you then have a nice Git history, and it reads better and you save much time. And I think every one of us has some workflows that he always is doing. And if you have something like that, you can convert it into a slash command. And then what happens after time, that you have more of these commands. And then you can also share it with your team. And I think this is the first step to get out more of these AI coding tools. Here, just an example, just an idea. So you could have a lint command that will run linter, and then it would tell Cloud Code here, just fix it. The same for type check. I also have one that creates a pull request with a proper description, and I also write down which things it should test. Then I have one called fix pipeline, where I use the GitHub CLI, and then I will see which things were failing in the CLI, and then Cloud Code will fix these things. Also one with CodeRabbit, I will talk more about it later. And also one idea, maybe you have a style guide as a team, how you want to write Vue components. You can list it down into your prompt, and then you can just say review comments, and then maybe automatically refactor them. But these are just ideas, but there are many options to do it. The important thing here is that you as a developer, you manually have to trigger these comments. They don't, Cloud Code will not run them automatically. I think you could make it work if you tell it in the Cloud MD file here, please, when you're done, run this command, but I didn't try that out yet. Yeah, this is the CodeRabbit example. So CodeRabbit is an AI review tool. And the reason why I use it for my side projects is that it's free for open source projects. So when I create a pull request, they spin up an AI with GitHub Actions, and then, yeah, it will do a review. And yeah, sometimes, of course, it also has false positives, and which doesn't make sense, but also sometimes it gives also good comments back, because this CodeRabbit itself, it will also read your Cloud MD files and will try to understand how the style guide of this project is. But then what I do, since I'm lazy, I have my review CodeRabbit command. What this is doing in the end is using the GitHub CLI, will get down all the comments, and then you see running 4 tasks. Then for each comment, it will spin up a sub-agent, but I will explain what sub-agents are later. And then it will verify if the comment makes sense. Yeah, because as I said, I don't know which model they use. It could be wrong. And then it will run, I don't know, for 3 or 5 minutes. Then, it will come back. But before I explain what happens next, I need to explain what sub-agents are. So at the beginning, I was telling that the main problem is always this context, that you only have 200K tokens available. And with agents, sub-agents, you can create a new agent. So in our example, this is the main agent, and then it will spin up all these other agents that will start fresh with its own context. So the only job that the first one will do is to check if the type assertion comment makes sense. It doesn't even know about all the other problems that are going on. Because if you don't do that, then, I don't know, CodeRobot maybe has 10 comments, and then this AI needs to think about 10 things at the same time. And this is not so good. That's why it's better to have a sub-agent for that. This is one solution why you can do that. And the other one is that you can define some roles. You could say you have a security sub-agent. They write down some security best practices, or code review agents. And you can give them a persona, kind of. One example, this is from the Anthropic documentation, is the debugger sub-agent. So you also see, again, front matter, same with our prompts, description, tools available, and then you basically explain it how it should do debugging. You could also, if you use Sentry, you could also say here, you can use the Sentry MCP or make an API call, and so on. So you have a specific agent to do only one thing. The main difference also between prompts and sub-agents is that Cloud Code will also use them automatically sometimes, if it knows that it could make sense, that we have a debugging agent available. You can also just create a sub-agent in the terminal. So with agents, then you can also say which tools are available. And the step before, you just describe what it should do. What I often do is, I don't know, I copy-paste a blog post of mine, how I want to write composables, and then I create a composable review sub-agent. Another example where you can now combine these slash commands with sub-agents is if you deal with a problem and you know you need to probably, in the old world, you need to read Stack Overflow and blog posts. So here I just wanted to know what are the best practices for Dexy.js for my project. And then I have a command called research. I describe what I want to know. And then Cloud Code will spin up 3 sub-agents. One is just reading my code base. The other one is reading documentation. And then it puts all these things into its context, and then it will generate a report on what I can improve. And then I read that. I also tell it to list down the resources it saw, and this can help a bit with the brainstorm process. And another example with prompts and sub-agents is, yeah, maybe here it's an overkill for my project, but I just play also with all these tools because I don't really need a security reviewer. But you could define some thing like Vue use, for example. Vue's sub-agent, the only job is for a new feature, it should check if there is something we can use from Vue use to do the same. Because these AI, they don't really have this in the training data. So I always try to use Vue if I can. I don't want to write my composable itself. You can also have some refactoring sub-agents. So I'm a fan of Martin Fowler and his refactoring book. So that can come up with some interesting things. And then you get a report back. And then you can, of course, also read that if it makes sense. But if you are lazy, like me, you can also just type in ultra sync. So this forces the model to sync longer, not really sync, but spend more tokens on a problem. And then it will kind of verify if what these sub-agents were finding, if that really makes sense for this project. And yeah, I also noticed that often the security sub-agent is always an overkill. So maybe for my simple side project, I can remove that because it was not finding anything useful. But the Vue sub-agent is often useful. Also the refactoring sub-agent. Then I see, okay, this component now is so big, it makes sense to refactor it. This is all things that you also, when you have experience with Vue, would also find yourself. But the idea is to automate all these processes. And that's why if you get better with these tools, now you see more options. You can be creative. You can now combine these slash commands with sub-agents. And maybe you find good workflows for your project. But of course, you also find out that you waste time. But I think at the moment, we all try to navigate what the best way is to use these tools. And yeah, this is then the analysis. And then it basically was finding out, okay, there are some valid things we could fix from the sub-agent report. Then this is unique to Cloud Code. The concept is called hooks. In Vue, we have life cycles like on mounted, on created, and then we do specific things. We can do the same for Cloud Code. So there are always life cycles. It's reading a file, it is deleting a file. When it stops, when the session starts, we can run things. You could, for example, every time it edit a file, you could run ESLint, or in this case, OXLint, because it's much faster. And then Cloud Code gets feedback. The reason why you need to do it is that Cloud Code doesn't have language server support. This is the difference between VS Code and, for example, OpenCode. So you could always run type check. Type check would take too much time, so I would not recommend it. I would run type check when it's finished with its task. And yeah, with this, we can combine these deterministic world with this non-deterministic world. You could also say when you have a .env file, that is not allowed to read it, or it should not delete something. And this example, yeah, I'm a fan of Vue shapecn, the component library, and I don't want that it changes these base buttons or that it deletes it. And then I have a hook, and then I tell it here, delete this shapecn button. And then you see it tries to delete it, but then this hook comes and it says, no, you can't do that. I also have a hook for that it should not use else, because I'm a fan of early returns, or it should not use as any. And you can also argue that this should be part of ESLint, but these are things that you can do before it's finished something, yeah? Because what I also noticed, it often tries to use as any and is not using type guards, and yeah, to come up with hacky solutions and not doing proper TypeScript. And with these hooks, we basically forbid it that it should even do something like that. And yeah, the last main feature, which is newer, is called skills. And skills is a simple concept. In the end, it's just a markdown file. But the advantage of something like MCPs is that it doesn't need so much context. I think this all gets more understandable if I just show you what a skill is. So Cloud Code itself has a skill that if you want to know how Cloud Code works, it will use this Cloud Code guide. So it will automatically use that. And what it's doing in the end, it will call a website. On this website, it has just listed down the documentation. So this is how the website looks. When you open it, you see that there's an overview, and then Cloud Code knows how it can read the documentation, and then it can answer your problem. In the past, for this case, you would use a MCP, but the problem with MCPs is the context is too long, it's too complicated. This is much more elegant. But this is also only one example for a skill. There are many examples, and I could probably do a talk only about skills. Then what I did is I did the same for V-test, for example, because most of the Vue projects, they always have a LLM's text file, and then you can do the same that Cloud Code is doing. So I don't need to use a MCP that Cloud Code gets the newest data out of the documentation. Yeah, this is how these LLMs TXT look. Also, Next has one. So basically, it's just a sitemap for AI, I would say, to navigate. And yeah, I did the same for Vue.jsTalks. So you see, this is how a skill looks. You have, again, front matter, and you have the description. And the important part, the only thing that will always be loaded in the context is always the description. And then if you ask how does the base button work in Vue.js, Cloud Code will load this skill, which is in the end just a markdown file, into this context. And then it knows what it needs to do. It needs to go to this website, and then it can fetch the documentation. You can also have more skills than that, but I think this is a useful way to get the latest documentation when sites supports these LLMs TXT file. Yeah, that's why I wanted to say these are much better than MCPs. And also one example is before you use the GitHub MCP server, you can just install the GitHub CLI and tell Cloud Code in the Markdown file here, use the GitHub CLI, because it has much more training data. It knows how to use the GitHub CLI. It doesn't know how to use the GitHub MCP server. It gets the tools as a context, but it's not so good to use them. And yeah, now one example where I use skills and how I add new features for my side projects. I have a brainstorm skill and the front-end design skill from Anthropic. And the basic idea with the brainstorm is that Cloud Code asks me questions against my requirement. And then it's spinning up these agents, finds out how my code base works. Then it asks me questions regarding this feature, multiple choice. It also now comes up with the design approach, how it should change index.db. I can give feedback. Then also for the front-end part, it is using ASCII, and it tries to tell me how it then will look, the new feature. And then I can also give my input back. And in the end, I will then have a plan. And this plan is longer than what you see here. But most of the time, if you use these AI coding tools, good is spent on the plan itself. So you read the plan, you think how the spec should be, and once the plan is good, then you just let Cloud Code run and change all the code. Because this typing and changing code, these AI tools are much faster than us, but they are not really good at coming up with good design decisions without any guidance. So that's why most of the time you spend time reading the plan. Yeah, now just before I slowly stop with my presentation. I just want to give some general tips. You can always start with the Cloud MD file. Then also you should think which things you can automate with adding more prompts. Then also think about sub-agents. Maybe you have a style guide. You could create a code review sub-agent for that. Then the next step would be to think about hooks. And then with skills, we can customize our workflow so that, we can use different things like the brainstorm skill. You could also use Git work trees to work on one or multiple tickets in parallel. And I think most important is that when you work at a team, you should share all the things that you learned. And then you should improve on that. I think this is the only way how, as a team, you can use this tool better. That if one developer has a cool prompt, just share it with the group. And the end goal, of course, should be to automate tasks and ship fast and hopefully better goal. And the last thing, but then I'm done. Something that I played with over the weekend is that you can also use Cloud Code in the CLI. And I wanted to try out if I can mimic what a QA engineer would do. So the idea is when I raise a pull request, I use Cloud Code, and it is using Playwright MCP, and it can verify if my feature works, and it should also try to break it to do explorative testing like a QA engineer would do. And I think this is working kind of good. I would need to spend more time because I'm no QA expert to improve the prompt, but it already found some issues from pull requests. So this is maybe something that I need to invest more time. But if you think about that, the next step would be do the same for SEO, for accessibility, and you have more automated checks. This example of how a report then looks, and you see it was testing the happy path and so on. But he also saw it found a bug, that large decimals didn't work. So this was kind of helpful. And as I said, it's just a GitHub action from Cloud Code itself. You can use it in your setup, and then you have a prompt. And this example is just to do code reviews, but you can also use it for other things. And if you want to know more about all these interesting things regarding AI, you can check out my blog post. And maybe there's something useful for you and your team. And of course, if any one of you has feedback or also is doing something similar, would also be happy to connect and talk about it. This was everything. Thank you all. I hope it was not too fast, but I could talk 2 hours about Cloud Code, I think. But
thank you, Alexander. That was really intensive course about the AI stuff in Cloud Code. I see that you have a lot of experience already. I just wanted to ask that, do you even imagine to get back when there were no any AI agents at all? Do you like that idea, or are you regretting it at all? Is it like helping you, or?
For my, I think it always depends. What I sometimes miss is this just coding and thinking for yourself about smaller problems. But then I also think that I'm now much faster, and I already am now a developer for more than 8 years, I think. So I also just like to try out new things. So I don't want to just stick with the same thing for the rest of my life, just changing the buttons color or writing it. So, but I get your point. I also sometimes miss this. You write something for yourself, but then what you always could do, you could do, I don't know, puzzles, things like that. But I think, to be honest, this is not really needed so much anymore because they can write better bubble sorts than me. But what they can't do is they have no idea how to write a good Vue application. So I see my role more as an architect, manager, kind of, not someone that just types code all the time. Yeah, I think that this will change, definitely.
So you think that developers will change the approach of develop stuff completely from coding by hands, but turn it into the more architectural stuff and dictating to AI what it should do?
Yeah, but it's also normal. If you imagine how they coded 50 years ago with I don't know, assembly and printing down things, this job was always changing all the time.
Oh yeah.
I had assembly in university, but I think nobody of us can now really write down assembly. And also Vue itself is abstraction, and this is then the next abstraction. Yeah.
Yeah, we're just living in the period, like when there were no any UI frameworks or web frameworks like Vue.js or React, but websites exist, right? So that was a raw HTML and CSS, but and JavaScript, of course, but it was working. We're just in another period of life, so we have to consider that it's changing.
Yeah. But what is fun for me, because if I would not have this access, I would not write my own side projects like workout tracking app because it would take too much time. So this I think is nice for me, that I'm now able to just be more creative because the coding part itself doesn't take so much time. But you still have to think about what is the best UX. Building software is still complicated, yeah. Even if you can code faster.
Yeah, I think we have one more question from Maxim in the chat. So Alexander, how do you choose when it's better to use sub-agents and where are the skills?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the difference between sub-agents is that they will use their own context. But sub-agents, they don't always run automatically. So the idea of a skill is, if the description is good, that it will run automatically and it will stay in the same context. So if you need to separate the context, then you need a sub-agent. If it still needs to be in the same context, you can use a skill for that. Yeah. I hope this answered the question, but yeah, the main difference is the context idea. And also what is interesting is that sub-agents can also use skills. So if you have test-driven development as a skill, and you say, here, please sub-agent code something, then it will read how in the project test-driven development works, and it will do it automatically. So you can combine these tools depending on your workflow and on the team's workflow.
Okay, thank you, Alexander. Okay, I think we have to move on. And just reminding you guys that was Alexander Opalic. Thank you for your presentation again. And we are just moving to our next speaker. Our next speaker is Magdalena Stutz. She's a Scrum Master at Squad Makers. She's based in Argentina, loves books, human interactions, and theater. Grateful to work in a field she's truly passionate about. So hello, Magdalena.
Hi, how are you?
I'm very, very good to see you there. So I'm passing the mic to you and presentation as well.
Okay, give me a minute. See. It's working?
Yep.
Okay, great. Hi, everyone. My name is Magdalena. I'm a Scrum Master at Squad Makers. I have background in HR and communication. passionate about people, teams, and culture. Across different teams and organizations, I have seen one pattern repeat itself. When delivery slows down or agility starts to struggle, the root cause it's rarely technical. It's usually human. Coming from HR, I learned early that performance and well-being are not opposites. They are deeply connected. Psychological safety, communication, and trust are what enable agile teams to perform sustainably. Today, I would like to share why putting people first is not only the right things to do, it actually makes agility works. Scrum gives us roles, ceremonies, and artifacts. But if people doesn't feel safe to speak up, challenge ideas, or make mistakes, none of that truly works. Psychological safety means feeling safe to speak up without fear or blame or humiliation. I have worked with teams that have very experienced developers, clear backlogs, and all the ceremonies in place, but during retrospectives, the room was silent. Not because everything was perfect, but because saying the wrong thing, it felt risky. Research on high-performance teams showed that psychological safety increases engagement and motivation, improves learning from mistakes, and leads to better problem solving. Google Project Aristotle identified psychological safety as the strongest predictor of team effectiveness, even more than individual talent or seniority. The invisible work of a Scrum Master, we can see in three ways. From a communication perspective, how we say things matters as much as what we say. Lack of clarity creates assumptions, and assumptions create conflict. From a human resources perspective, teams are living systems, not resource pools. Motivations, burnout, and trust directly affect delivery. I once worked with a team whose velocity kept dropping. The data says low performance, but the conversations reveal constant interruptions, unclear priorities, and emotional exhaustion. Velocity was visible, trust was not. But trust was the real issue. As a Scrum Masters, we work in this invisible layer every day. We are not a process cop. A Scrum Master is a bridge between urgency and team capacity, between delivery pressure and sustainable peace, between different personalities, roles, and expectations. For example, the team feels overwhelmed but doesn't say it out loud. The business asks constantly for just one more thing, a little more thing. The Scrum Master translates, facilitates, and protects the focus. Being a bridge is uncomfortable, but it's necessary. A good Scrum Masters move conversations, not tasks. We use different tools to turn trust, communication, and psychological safety into daily habits. We use the definition of ready and definition of done to create clarity and share agreements. A story isn't blocked because the team is low. Maybe it could be blocked because expectations were never aligned. We use emotional check-ins to understand where the team is starting from. A 2-minute check-in once revealed that half of the team were exhausted. That changed the sprint plan and prevent from burnout. Sometimes a 2-minute check can save hours of conflict later. We use role and expectation canvas to prevent hidden frustration, where when roles are unclear, accountability turns into blame. We also use impact versus blocker matrix to, to prioritize with intentions. Not all blockers are equal. Sometimes just make noise, others stop value completely. And we use productive retrospectives to learn not to complain. A retrospective is not about what went wrong. It's about what we are brave enough to talk about. Agility is not just a framework. It's a way of relating to one another. When we put people first, collaboration improves, learning accelerates, and performance becomes sustainable. Agility asks to deliver faster. People ask to be human. The real challenge and the real opportunity is doing both at the same time. I thank you. I accelerate too much. I'm nervous.
Oh yeah, thank you, Magdalena. So we went out from the artificial stuff into the human relation stuff, right? So
Yes.
I actually agree that especially with these emotional checks you set, maybe you can elaborate how you usually doing that in your work, how it looks like.
Okay. For example, at this point, I have a team that we we have a delivery a few days ago, and they are extremely exhausted because it was a very big delivery, and we need. We are all, how can I say? I don't know how can I say it. Exhausted, angry. They feel like bad. We are a bad relation, and then I have time to talk everyone, like a 2 minute talk with each with everyone, and then we can say about these feelings and about this exhaustiveness, and that help us to identify that we are in chaos and we need to slow down, talk with the product owner, and then prioritize the tasks that we are going to work in the next sprint, and that help us to feel better and calm, and that deliver values so much in a better way.
Yeah, as Alexandra noticed in the chat, that there is also studies that shows that the teams performs better when they feel emotionally safe, and I fully agree with that.
That is a really good observation, and a lot of studies that work on that.
Yeah, developers are also humans, but developers are currently trying to be less human as possible based on the new trends. Like
that's often forgot to a lot of leaders, because they think that developers are machines, and here we say it cannot unplug in a different project or a different task, because we are humans and need time to land to the new project.
So the Scrum Masters are not only members in the team that organizing the processes, but also some kind of psychologist when it's needed, right?
Yeah, we are facilitators, and we are kind of psychologists. Yeah.
That's good. We need to have those people in the programming, definitely.
Yes. Thank you.
So yeah, thank you, Magdalena. That was a nice step out from machines to humans. And we are moving to in our agenda to our next speaker. So thanks again. Okay, our next speaker is Matt Elen. Matt is also not the first time in our meetups. So hello, Matt. Matt started, there's just a few facts about Matt. He started working as a full stack developer, JavaScript and PHP, specialized in Frontend and Vue.js for the last 8 years. And in total, he has 13 plus years in software engineering. He's from New Zealand. He loves traveling, visited 35 countries. Wow. And as a funny fact, never says no to tiramisu on the menu. Hey, Matt, nice to see you again there.
Hey, thanks for having me back. Let me share my screen.
Absolutely.
We're going to do this screen today. And there we go. Sweet. Yeah, I'm Matt. Tonight or today, depending on where you are joining us in the world, I want to talk about Google Maps and Vue. And I want to give a little bit of a taster to see how easy it is to integrate a Google Map into your Vue application, how we can still keep the reactivity of everything, because that's one of the reasons why we like Vue is the reactivity-ness of it. So I want to show how we can do that, as well as some cool things you can do with that. So before I get kicking off into coding and that kind of thing, I was sort of being a bit reflective. And, it's the time of year to be reflective as we're ending the calendar year, as we're entering the festive season. We sort of look back. And I was sort of thinking about how did I get to where I am today with like an interest in Google Maps and just maps in general. And I realized it comes down to a gift I've got. Now, when I look back at the gifts I've received over the Christmas period, over the many years of Christmas, 2 gifts stand out, particularly from my grandma, from my nana. One, if the slide will work, there we go. One is a Lego football pitch. So this was a great, fun Lego set that you built a pitch out of Lego, and then you had these men, as you can see there, on the pitch, and you sort of flipped the ball in between them. And so me and my brother would have hours versing each other on this pitch playing football. So that was one of them. The other gift, randomly enough, was the New Zealand Illustrated Road Atlas. Now, I have no idea why someone thought it was a good idea to give a 6 or 7-year-old a road atlas. Maybe it was because, so in New Zealand, we end up traveling, like our family were several hours apart from where we lived. And so especially on Christmas Day, we'll spend up to 8-9 hours of the day just driving. And I'm not too sure if it was because my parents were sick of us kids in the back asking, are we there yet? I'm the oldest of 3 brothers, so I probably instigated the are we there yet drone. Maybe it was that, I'm not too sure. But I got this book, and I remember always looking at the book and reading the atlas and just learning how communities in New Zealand were connected via highways, via, there's no trains in New Zealand really, so it's just which roads to take, as well as in this book there were random other facts like how the agricultural industry in New Zealand worked and what we had, and so learning a little bit about that. But I remember I would just be very interested and enthralled by maps of New Zealand and roading atlases and that kind of thing. So I think it was at this point I got really into enjoying or looking at maps and figuring out, how do we get from A to B and that kind of thing. And then thinking back of how this collided with my engineering and development is when I left uni, I went to work for a website builder company, and their employment challenge was, hey, take Google Maps, take another API and put information from the API into Google Maps and use different shapes and colors and stuff to describe what the kind of information is coming up from the API. So that was my first taster of the Google Maps API, which this was from 2012. So it's been several years I've been playing around, and the API has changed quite drastically since then. So it's been, even just looking at the UI, having a look at this UI of Google Maps, it looks quite different today to what it was back then. Now, or more recently, I've used it in an app here in the UK that I've made called Train Finder, which helps people find cheap train tickets. Here I've got a Google Map and I'm overlaying different locations that you can travel with on the train. And I'll do a little demo of that later so you can actually see how it actually works and that kind of thing.
Yeah, just one more thing, Matt. Are we? Just want to be sure we are still on the first slide. Is that intended, right?
Oh no! Why is that? Sorry. Let me stop presenting and let me try that again. Thank you for that. If I do this, is that better?
Oh yeah, that's changed definitely.
Okay, that's changed again. Now you can see Google Map.
Yeah, how did I end up here?
Yes.
Is what I see on the screen.
Fantastic. I'm not too sure how we ended up having a frozen screen, but that's okay. So if I click that, does it still show the Google Map UI? It does, doesn't it? Is it still showing the Google Map UI rather than another UI? Hello?
Sorry, say it again.
In my screen, is it still showing the Google Maps UI or is it showing another UI?
So what I see now is the slide, how did I end up here? And at the bottom, there is a screenshot or something with the Google Map from the browser.
Okay, that's not right. Don't you love like when you do live presentations and stuff that this just doesn't work? Okay, I want that screen.
Yeah, just the usual presenter curse.
Yeah, pretty much. Okay, so we've got code there. Now, if I switch to presentation, okay.
Okay, it's now switched from the code to the presentation.
Oh, but now it's not. Okay, we're gonna have fun with this. Yeah, okay. Let's see how we go with this. Cool. So, Google Maps. We're going to talk about Google Maps and how we can integrate it with a Vue app. Very much, this is the most easiest way to meet a 1 in a million bug, and we haven't even done the live coding. Here I was thinking live coding will be full of bugs. Nope, it's just the presentation. Anyway, okay, what we're going to cover today, we're going to talk about how we can just simply set up a basic map. I then want to show how we can set up easily clustering, grouping different markers together. I then want to just do a brief overview on how we can style the map and introduce some different colors and change how the map actually looks. We'll then briefly talk about geometric calculations. And then finally, we'll finish off talking about the Google API console and pricing for Google Maps. So, this is, oh, there we go. Okay. Sweet. Let me introduce myself a little bit more. I'm Matt. I'm head of front-end engineering at Swag Labs. I'm based here in London, and I'm actually one of the co-organizers of the Vue.js London meetup. So if you are based here in London and want to come to a physical meetup as well, I would love to have you with us. I've been building some experiences for the web for a while now, and it is great to be back and be able to share and talk about Google Maps. So let's dive into the live coding. So what I want to do, or what I have done already, is I've built a basic map. How have I built a basic Google map here? Well, let's dive into some code. This is just a basic Vue.js app component. I am using the options API. I haven't quite fully mentally switched to composition, but you can understand that both this will work in either setup. Here in my template area, I've simply got my Google Maps component. And this is coming from a great component library called the Vue.js Google Map. If I just switch for a moment and switch to here, this is a really easy set of composition components. Easy set of components that do the whole thinking around reactivity and Google Maps without having to think about it. You're just able to build what you want, do it with Vue, and this looks after the whole Vue reactivity and how it works with Google Maps. And I'll show you about that in a moment. So that's what I'm using here. I'm simply importing that. In my component itself, I'm referencing an API key, just some basic styles. And then we're going to look at, I've got to reference a center, like where is the center of the map, which I've got here, returning a latitude and longitude, and then I have a zoom level. Cool. So that's what gets me this. Now I'm thinking to sort of add a bit of interactivity and to show how easy it is to build with this. I'm thinking, let's take the scenario that I want to click on the map and I want to add a marker there. So I want to think about the click event. I want to take that click event from Google Maps, pop it into my Vue app, and I want to make a new marker. So let's do that. Now, with the Vue 3 Google Map, I'm able to take the events of Google Map and just instantly use it. I don't need to do any weird things. So I'm able to look at the Google Maps API documentation. So here are my events, and I've got a simple click event. Wonderful. So I can easily jump to my code here. I can go at click, and we're just going to call it add marker. Cool. I'm going to pop down here. I'm just going to add a method. Cool. We're going to do add marker. Cool. Let's just take the event and let's just console log that out so we actually know what we're dealing with. Cool. Let's save that. And let's jump back in here. And then I can click. And here I've got a lovely event. And I can see from my latitude and longitude, it's going to be in a function here in a lat long key here. So let's get that out. So I've got my marker here in my data as well, my markers. So we're going to do this.markers.push. So we're going to pass in an object. Now I know for my markers, the latitude and longitude needs to live in a position object. So we're going to go position. Cool. And then I've got another object. And I've got, oh, here we go. Lovely autocomplete starting to fill it out for me, but we're not quite there because that's not quite where this is. This is in my lat long here. So I'm going to do lat long dot lat. And lat is a function, so I'm just going to function that. I'm going to pop that in there and make that a function as well. And then just to keep track of what I'm doing, I'm just going to do this very lazily. Just copy and paste it in there. Yes, I could make this const, but I'm not going to worry about that tonight. Right. So I can click there and I can see that I'm getting my position here, which is what we want. Now, we just need to actually display the marker on the map. How do we go about that? Well, we're able to just simply add in here in the template a marker, or in particularly the advanced marker. So let me just close off Google Maps like that, expand that out. I'm going to take an advanced marker. Just going to add that to the components there. So advanced marker. So we'll do a V4 because we're going to have multiple markers. So we're going to do marker and markers. Sweet. Now I'm going to need to do an ID or a key here. So let's just do a marker.id. Now we'll all know that I haven't actually pushed an ID. So I am just going to just add in an ID here, ID, and we're just going to do math.random just for this example. Voila. Cool. And then the marker itself is going to need I believe it's called options. So we're just going to pass that marker straight in like that. Voila. Let's hit save there. Oh, so if I click, typical. This is where the errors happen now. Unknown value on that. You know what I did? I need to chuck in, make that an actual, yes, do it like that. Okay, now you can't load properly, because I do appreciate that the Google Maps API does give some nice friendly, well, developer-friendly errors here. I need a map ID. That's a lovely, easy fix. So let's just do map. Was it called a map ID? Yeah, map ID, my awesome map. Save that. I will just hit refresh just to make sure we've got everything nice and clean. Oh, look at that. Now we've got a lovely marker appearing. I can zoom in, and let's just click and add some markers, which is absolutely wonderful. However, this is great. Now, if I zoom out a bit, you'll notice I've got all these markers together. That makes it a bit hard to see. And I'm like, it is nice, or it would be for a nicer UI experience to sort of group these together. And that's where clustering comes in. So if I go back here, what I'm able to do is I'm able to import another piece of the Vue 3 Google Map called Market Cluster. So let's pop that in there. Let's pop this as a component there. And then how do I use this? I just have to wrap my advanced markers around it. Let's do that. Let's move that up there. Oh, no, don't refactor. Don't do that. Save that. Jump back in here. I hit refresh. I'm aware I'm getting these errors. I'm not going to worry about them tonight. I'm going to zoom in and we're going to click in some areas, and you can start to see it starting to cluster. So let's just add in some more. And then I can zoom out a bit, and you can see now it's starting to properly cluster them, which is quite nice, and it's quite easier to see and be able to be like, oh yeah, you know, I've got seven markers there. These are customizable. So I'm able to change the colors, I'm able to change the shape, the font. It's quite cool just how customizable not just the clusters are, but the markers as well, which I'll show in a mo on my Train Finder app. And as well as with the ability of able to do like different events and how you can change how the map behaves, it gives you as an engineer a lot of tools to be able to create quite cool experiences and user experiences with Google Maps. Cool, that is the live coding done, and we passed. So well done, everyone. Some of the other cool little features I'll just briefly talk about is you're able to do your own kind of styling. So you're able to customize how a map looks, which might be to do with around matching a brand or a color scheme of your application. You might want to remove distractions, which I've actually got a tab open here for this. Let's just click in here. Here's something I could prepare earlier. Here is a lovely map of Seattle, and I love this mapstyle.withgoogle.com site. It makes it really easy to play around and see what you like. Now, if I'm really wanting to highlight the different attractions in this area, I can remove some things that are a bit of distractions. For example, we've got some roads like everywhere, so let's just reduce, not fully remove, but I can easily reduce the amount of roads we've got. What I want to do is, I've noticed like I'm getting, if I zoom in a bit, I have like Whole Foods Market come up, which if I'm trying to highlight attractions, I'm not going to travel to Seattle to go to the Whole Food Market. So let's jump into more options and let's go into business, all the businesses, and we're just going to hide that. And if there we go. So that makes it a bit easier to highlight some of the attractions like the Space Needle or the Sculpture Park. From here, I'm able to click Finish. And I'm able to copy and paste this JSON here into my website or app. Alternatively, the more modern way to do it now is you can host it with the Google Cloud Console. And so Therefore, it just gets updated everywhere. You don't need to worry about publishing a new version, or if it's in an app, creating a new version to go out to the app stores and stuff. You don't need to do that. You can just let Google host it in its Cloud Console, and it just gets updated everywhere, which is nice. Cool. So that's map design styling. The other cool feature with Google Maps and the libraries, it allows you to do some calculations around locations. For example, if I have a location and I have an area and I want to know if that location is within an area, it will do those kind of calculations. I could also use it to compute the length of something or of a distance from A to B, as well as compute heading here. For example, here is heading calculated from New York to Paris. And so it's able to do those kind of calculations. I'm aware there's other libraries you can use for this. However, if I'm already using Google Maps and already downloading in the front end, the API, and running that, I don't want to add something else that could, I don't need to add another dependency, really. I can just use what I already have. Saying that, I wouldn't use Google Maps just for the sake of this. You know what I mean? Finally, let's just briefly talk about actually how do you get set up with this. As in, you'll notice that I had an API key reference in my code base. And so it's easy to jump onto the Google Cloud API console. You set up a project, you can pop in or enable which APIs you want to use. For example, here is the Maps JavaScript API, and start using it. Now, it does cost, but there is a free tier. And fortunately, it's about 10,000 map loads for that kind of map, the dynamic map that I was playing around just before. Now, depending on what kind of scenario or how you want to integrate this Google map into your Vue application, 10,000 might be enough. If it's not, then you can see there's some of the pricing of how much it is for loading a map into your product. Before I jump into questions, I want to show you about Train Finder, because there's some cool examples of actually how it, some other cool things you can do with that. So let's go to Train Finder. Typically, everyone's watching you. I can't spell. And the internet loads slow too. Right, let's just say I'm traveling from London this weekend. So this is the app that I built a couple of years ago. And it allows you to find cheap train tickets based from where you are. And so we're going to load up a map. Here you can see it's starting to load. I'm using here custom markers. So all the little dots, the blue dots, are custom markers. So I'm able to click in, and of course something isn't working when I'm trying to show it off. I'm able to use custom markers to represent a town or a train station. For example, here's Chelmsford here. I can click on that. Like I said, custom click event. It's able to load up some information about that. And here is some custom info box or window box. And so I'm able to display the price in there. Fortunately, with the Vue 3 Google Maps component, I'm able to display these kind of things. So here's that info window I was talking about earlier. And so you're able to pass in content, and you can also use this component to display different shapes onto your map, which is very handy and very cool. So yeah, that is what I wanted to show you about Google Maps and Vue. I hope you've learned something. I hope it was giving you a nice little taster, a little introduction into what you can do. And thanks for bearing with me as, presentation issues and that kind of thing. I'll push up the code of what I was playing around with on GitHub later. So there's a QR code that you can connect with. And yeah, connect with me over LinkedIn as well. That'll be great. Questions time.
Thanks, Matt. I wanted to ask, is the Google Maps working only with the real world, our world map, or we can create a custom map, for example, map from the image or something like that?
Thinking like a fake map, like a non-real world, like
yeah,
it's like the Lord of the Rings and Middle Earth kind of thing. As far as I'm aware, no. But I don't know. I don't know that for sure. That's a very good question.
Yeah, I was working with another map tool, which is LeftLet. Not sure if you know it or not. And I was need to create a map for the game in the browser. So I wonder if Google have it or not, but seems like if it is not. I'm asking because I see that there is a quite good tools you shared to us in the Google, like building those JSONs with the settings and stuff like that. So that would be cool to make a suggestion for the Google to make a support for the custom apps as well.
Yeah, true that. I know that, I know for Google, when you say custom maps, they talk about like shareable lists of locations and be able to like easily customize the icons, but not fully going into a development, like building your own website. But yeah, I'm not aware that you have your own like Middle Earth, for example, just thinking of Lord of the Rings off the top of my head.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I see the Maxim is also right in there that Google Earth seems to have this functionality for maps. And yeah,
I'm aware they do like Mars, which is quite fascinating, in Google Earth, flying around Mars. But yeah, I'm not sure about Google Maps themselves. But then maybe there's another API for Google Earth that you can integrate into your application, but I'm unaware of how that works.
do you aware, is there any AI tools also integrated with the Google Maps? Maybe they did something recently, like they did this new version of Gemini. Maybe something happened with the Google Maps as well.
That is a good question. I haven't noticed or seen anything, but I'm not fully aware of that. I know, like, especially with Google Maps, it's very consumer product. And so you've got the Google Maps product, and then this is the side APIs that you can have fun with displaying stuff and using it in your applications. Yeah, they're definitely opening things up to use with like Gemini and that kind of thing. I'm not too sure if they're opening that up for engineers to integrate into that. I would imagine that probably comes in under something you would do in Gemini itself rather than in the Google Maps APIs. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a tricky one, but I think that's the food every one of us can eat, and try to Google by ourselves. Is there anything new in this area?
Yeah, true that.
Yeah, I wonder when we will see currently we have Google Earth, when we will have Google Mars or Google Venus or Google something new.
Yeah, maybe if we end up colonizing like those planets, building a moon base, they're going to need mapping, or how you drive from A to B or different places, and as communities build and that kind of thing. So yeah, that might be the time we get Google Maps on Mars or on the moon and that kind of thing. Who knows?
Google Galaxy, something.
Yeah.
Like. Okay, so thanks, Matt. That was amazing as always. I think we don't have any more questions now in the chat. So thanks everyone for spending this time with us and being part of Vue.js Talks community. So we hope today's talks gave you something new, something inspirational to carry into the new year. So wherever you're watching from, we wish you a calm days, great holidays, and a strong start of the year ahead. Stay curious, stay warm, and see you in the next Vue.js Talks, guys. Bye-bye.